Hi there. Thanks for joining me today. Over the past couple of weeks, we've explored a calculation called break-even point or break-even revenue. The most misunderstood calculation in the LTL industry, yet it's the most important for an LTL leader such as yourself to understand because it has such a huge impact on profitability of your company. In fact, not understanding this calculation and its behavior has put so many carriers out of business through the years, and it also keeps so many carriers on what I call that profitability roller coaster ride. So it is a critical calculation to understand, and what drives that break-even point is that all-important calculation we've talked about since day one, and that's variable cost as a percent of revenue. And the reason variable cost as a percent of revenue is so important is that the percent of variable cost to revenue drives the contribution margin percent that you have left over to cover the fixed and semi-fixed cost of the company. So it's a very important calculation to understand. So the way we improve our break-even point, the way we improve profitability is to manage that relationship of revenue to variable cost. And we manage that by managing the quality and quantity of revenue that we bring into the organization, and then by managing the variable cost that we use in operations to move that revenue through the system. So it's the quality and quantity of revenue and the variable cost that the operations uses to move that through the system. Okay, of your total variable cost that we've been discussing, 96 to 97% of your total variable cost is going to come from three cost areas. It's going to come from your pickup and delivery operation, your dock operation, and your line haul operation. So those three areas, cost areas, are 96, 97% of all your variable cost. Typically, your P&D operation is going to be 28 to 32% of your revenue. Dock will be somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 to 8% of each revenue dollar. And if you're a regional carrier, then you're going to find that line haul cost is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 28 to 32 cents out of every revenue dollar as well, almost equal to P&D cost when you throw in the equipment cost, variable cost per mile for the equipment and P&D, and then also the wages and the fringes of the P&D driver. So within those three areas, P&D and dock and line haul, you have operating inefficiencies. It's just the real world. There are operating inefficiencies in those three areas. And generally, when I go into a new client and put the TPG system in, which can measure those operating inefficiencies, we generally find that in P&D, the carrier is 30 to 40% inefficient in P&D. Dock operation, I'll find 12 to 15% inefficiency in the dock operation. And if you're a regional carrier, we'll find probably 30 to 35% in line haul. Knowing your operating inefficiencies in P&D and dock and line haul is really critical to you as a carrier. You have to be able to quantify those operating inefficiencies in those areas for two reasons. Number one, they're driving up your variable cost as a percent of revenue, and number two, you're assigning too much cost to the customer in the form of price. You're trying to pass the cost of your operating inefficiencies on to the customer in the form of price. So if you don't know your operating inefficiencies and the cost of your operating inefficiencies, then you really don't have accurate knowledge of your cost. And this is the basic problem with your traditional costing systems that are out in the marketplace, the cost-based systems as I call them, is they can't measure operating inefficiencies in P&D and dock and line haul. They don't have that capability. So they are assuming the carrier's operating at 100% efficiency, and as I stated earlier, nothing can be further from the truth. So with those systems, you're trying to pass too much cost on to the customer. As current TPG clients know and understand, the TPG system can measure and quantify the cost of those operating inefficiencies in P&D, dock, and line haul, and factor in the value of removing those inefficiencies into the pricing process. And then we want to make sure, using the TPG operations module that shows our operating efficiencies in P&D and dock and line haul, that the operations department is absorbing that additional growth with the cost we already have in place by removing those operating inefficiencies from their terminal and from the company. So that's the strategy behind my grow and absorb mantra that I'm always hounding my clients with, grow and absorb. And really we do. We want to grow our revenue, and then we want to make sure that we're removing our operating inefficiencies in P&D and dock and line haul by absorbing that revenue and shipment count growth with cost we already have in place. Let's don't throw any more assets at it. I tell my clients, they get tired of me hearing this, but it is true for a regional carrier in particular. From an operations standpoint, we're going to make our money in P&D. We're going to have the biggest impact on a day-to-day basis on our variable cost as a percent of revenue in the P&D operation. And so I put a lot of emphasis on the operations side initially to really get in and manage the P&D operation on a daily basis. The reason I do that is because we have almost total control over that P&D operation on a day-to-day basis. We know the deliveries we're going to make, pretty much know the pickups we're going to make. It's pretty much the same day of the week. So we have a lot of control over that now, and it is one of our largest, if not the largest, cost bucket in the variable cost side, with 28 to 32 cents out of every revenue dollar going into that P&D bucket, basically the same as line haul. But the difference is we have to run those line haul trailers on a daily basis, whether we have 10 bills or 15 bills on it, to make service. We have service commitments that we have to make. So we don't have as much control over line haul on a daily basis as we do P&D. And while dock is important, I don't mean to minimize the importance of managing dock efficiencies. Of those three buckets, it is the smallest bucket, with probably 6 to 8 cents out of every revenue dollar being consumed by the dock operation. So I put a lot of emphasis in terms of variable cost as a percent of revenue and managing that on the P&D side. In fact, you look at some of the market leaders in the industry today, and I can assure you they have the most efficient P&D operation on a day-to-day basis against anybody they compete against. So P&D is critical for us to pay a lot of attention to, because they have such a huge impact on our variable cost as a percent of revenue. Another saying that my clients get tired of hearing me saying, but it's so true, and we're going to look at it in just a moment, is that small changes produce large changes in either the up or down direction. Small changes produce large changes in either the up or down direction. Now we're going to look at some slides here in just a moment that will drive this home, and I think it'll also drive home why I put so much emphasis on P&D from an operation standpoint, because you're going to see the impact a small change in P&D performance has on the variable cost of this particular company, and the impact it has on profitability, and the impact it has on the break-even point. So we're going to take a look at some slides now, and I hope this will drive it home for you. Okay, let's take a look at a P&D report, or TPG P&D report, and see what it's telling us. I'm looking at the report here, so excuse me for looking at the numbers here so I don't get them wrong. So let's follow me along on this report, and we'll take a look at what it's telling us, and then we'll translate this into some cost and opportunities. As you can see, looking left to right under GRD total, grand total, this is a P&D report for a company, a client, for the month of May of this year. On the left-hand side, you can see that their total P&D operation, they used 16,599.53 hours. They had 380.16 hours of delay time at a customer's dock for whatever reason. They drove 319,481 miles. The PKUP is pickup, the DLVR is delivery, and the PRWK is what we call productive work. And what this does, the system will look at every stop, every shipment the drivers pick up and deliver, and it will calculate a time it should take them to load or unload that particular shipment while on the customer's dock. And of course, every shipment is different. So in terms of productive work, we're saying here that under PRWK they had 5,083.91 hours of productive work to perform that month, loading and unloading shipments on the customer's dock. Now, of that 5,083.91, 1,656.7 hours were pickups, and 3,427.21 hours was delivery. So you add those two together, you get 5,083.91 hours of productive work. Now, under the total there, the system looked at the miles they drove and the productive work they had to perform, and said, we're going to allow them 14,513.99 hours to drive the miles and do the productive work they had to perform. They took 16,599.53 hours, so you can see that under the performance section, under DRV, which is driver, they had an 87.44 driver performance. Now that should be 100 or above. Now the next column, it says cost, is measures the management and the terminal based on the hours they worked, the drivers were on the street, and the miles they drove. Did management give them enough work to do? And in this case, you can see it was a 140.4. So that number should be 100 or below. So this is telling us that the P&D operation for that month was 40.4% inefficient because management and leadership at the terminal level didn't give them enough work to perform. Another way to say that is that we have the ability to do 40.4% more productive work with the cost we already have in place today. Grow and absorb. Grow and absorb. Sound familiar? So there you have it, sports fans. So that's the magic number. So as we grow our revenue base, we want to make sure that the terminals are removing their operating inefficiencies by absorbing that additional growth with the cost already in place. And if we see that occur, if that occurs, we'll see that 140.4 begin to go down. So under LTL freight, they had 19,828 stops, 24,231 shipments, 63,069 handling units. Weight in LTL weight was 24,752,900 pounds. Under volume shipments, they picked up and delivered 138 volume shipments. Volume stops, and they had 691 shipments, 13,987 handling units, and 3,084,798 pounds. LTL picks and drops, trailers that were picked or dropped with freight on them. They didn't have to unload it, either customer loaded or unloaded. They dropped or picked 1,783 LTL trailers. That was 8,246 bills, 33,185 handling units, and 6,623,263 pounds. And you can see under the VOL SP, they picked and dropped 123 truckload trailers at customers' docks. Now back to the left-hand side on the bottom, you see they ran 1,797 P&D trips that month. They averaged 178 miles per trip, and they averaged 14.6 miles between stops. They had enough work for 1,279.91 trips, and workload to net, which is the percent of the driver's day doing productive work, was 30.63%. So the drivers spent 30.63% of their day picking up and delivering freight. The other 69.37% was driving the average 178 miles per trip and doing their pre and post-trip inspection. So this is what the TPG report tells its clients, and the key number, as we said, is that cost under the cost column, that 140.4. So as we grow, if we're absorbing that growth with the cost we already have in place here, removing those operating inefficiencies, we'll see that number begin to go down, and it has a tremendous impact on profitability. Now, at a 140.4, as I said, 100 is perfect, or you want to be 100 or below. If you try to make that transition too quickly, you'll have chaos. You'll have mutiny. So what we try to do is just set incremental goals for the terminals, so that as they grow, they begin to absorb, because we know we can't go from a 140 to a 100 in 30 or 45 or 60 days. We have to kind of make that a journey. So let's take a look and see the impact of setting a goal for a particular terminal or company has on the profitability of the company. And so before we go any further, let's define productive work a little better than that. It is the time in front of the customer, the driver's time in front of the customer loading and unloading freight on the customer's dock. But you can see here I've highlighted for you the PK, the pickup, delivery, productive work, and total productive work. What we do is we go into this company, for example, has 10 terminals. So we'll go in and look at each terminal's P&D operation, and we will develop a set of engineered time allowances for that particular terminal based on their P&D operation. Let's just say at Atlanta, Georgia. So we would create a set of time allowances for the time and the cost to operate in Atlanta, Georgia, and we do the same thing for a Florence, South Carolina. Totally different markets altogether, totally different P&D operations. So each terminal is going to have its own time allowances that what we call productive work, and it will tell us the time it should take the driver to load or unload a particular shipment at that customer's dock. So each terminal has its own unique allowances. I just thought I wanted to get that thrown in before we went any further. So, okay, let's take and break those numbers down a little bit and just see what a small improvement and their P&D performance has on the profitability, on the performance of the company. So let's take a look. You can see here that the wage and fringe cost per hour P&D driver for this particular company is $28.79. The variable cost for P&D equipment, a piece of P&D equipment on the street, is $1.16 a mile. And there's our 140.4 cost that we saw in the P&D report that we looked at just a moment ago. So as I said, we're going to take small steps. So we're just going to try to get a little bit of an improvement. So we kind of settled on, let's see if we can get to a 128. Well, that's a 12.4% improvement in performance. We saw in the report that they actually ran 1,797 P&D trips that month. And getting that 12.4% improvement and driving that cost down to a 128 would be the equivalent of running 1,638 trips rather than 1,797, or a difference of 159 equivalent trips for the month. So they're averaging 81.7 P&D trips a day. Hitting the 128 would be the equivalent of 74.5 trips a day, or a difference of 7.2 trips per day. Now the company has 10 terminals in their system. So when you do the math on that, the equivalent reduction of trips per day for each terminal by growing and absorbing would be 7/10 of a trip per day. Not much at all. It's kind of small, isn't it? And we saw from the report they averaged 21. They actually had 21,872 P&D stops. There's our productive work hours again of 5,084 hours of productive worker time loading and unloading shipments on the customer's dock. They're averaging 12 stops a trip. So to get to that 128 cost performance goal, they would need to be at 13 stops per trip. So we're saying it's one more stop per driver. Now, not every driver is going to have one more stop. Some drivers may have 2 stops, 3 stops, and some may not need any because they're performing so well. But on the whole, for the company, it needs to be averaging 1 stop, additional stop per driver. Now, you see, as we saw, they were on the street 16,600 hours. And their hours per P&D driver were 9. We saw the 178 miles per trip. So if we take the productive work hours of 5,084 and divide it by the number of trips, we see that the drivers are averaging 2.83 hours of productive work per trip, or 2.83 hours of their day on the customer's dock, loading and unloading shipments. To get to the 128, that would improve that to 3.1 hours per driver. So basically we're saying that 1 stop per trip would be an additional 0.27 of an hour additional work per driver, or 16 minutes a driver. So basically you're saying 1 stop is equivalent to 16 minutes for a driver. So that would be the result of that 1 additional stop per trip. Now the cost to run a P&D trip for this company, if you got 9 hours per day per driver, as we see here, the wage and fringe cost at $28.79 an hour is going to be $265.94. The mileage cost per trip with the 178 miles times the $1.16 a mile is going to be $206.48. So when you add those two together, just visualize every time a P&D unit goes through the gate, it's costing that company $472.42. Now our P&D cost for May is pretty simple to calculate. We know their total cost per trip was $472.42. They ran 1,797 trips, right? So if you take the $472.42 times the 1,797 trips, their P&D cost for the month of May was $848,945. Now, if we can get that cost down to a 128, that cost down to a 128 instead of 140.4, our cost at goal would be $773,967, or a reduction of $74,978 for the month of May. So if you annualize that at that rate, that's a reduction of $899,737 a year, or $3,408 a day. Isn't that amazing, folks? You see, small changes produce large changes in either the up or down direction. So for this company, just an additional 16 minutes of productive work per driver in their company would save that company $900,000 a year, or reduce their P&D costs $3,408 a day. That's nothing to sneeze at, is it? All right, let's bring this baby home by looking at the impact this small improvement of 16 minutes of productive work per driver has on the profitability of the company. So let's take a look at this slide. You can see this is the income statement, and you can see revenue per day 146,565, shipment count 1576. Now let's go down here to the variable cost. Their variable cost per day was $119,074 for a day for May. Now we're going to improve that $3,408 improvement in P&D cost is going to drop that down to $115,666 a day. Our variable cost as a percent of revenue does what? Goes from 81.24 to 78.92. Just what we want to see. So that dropped 2.33%. Contribution dollars obviously is going to go up from $27,491 to $30,899, or $3,408 obviously. And here it is. By managing that variable cost as a percent of revenue, it impacts our contribution margin in a positive way, which is going to impact our break-even point. So our contribution margin percent improved from 18.76 to 21.08. Fixed and semi-fixed cost is what it is. But bottom line, by improving that P&D performance from 140 to a 128, or 16 minutes per driver additional productive work, reduced the total cost of the company for that per day $3,408, and they went from a $4,334 a day loss down to $926 a day loss. And you can see from a 103 operating ratio to a 100.6, or almost break even. So that drove down the operating ratio 2.3 points. Revenue per shipment didn't change, but our variable cost per shipment did. It dropped from $75.55 a shipment to $73.39 a shipment, an improvement of $2.16. So our contribution dollars per shipment, we picked up an additional $2.16 per shipment. And what is it I keep telling you we need to watch and keep our eye on? Variable cost as a percent of revenue and our contribution dollars per shipment. We'll want to watch those two numbers. And if it starts going in the wrong direction, let's jump on it and fix it. So bottom line, our break-even revenue went from $169,671 a day down to $150,957 a day, or a drop of $18,714. Percent of break-even was 86.38%. With that 16 minutes of improvement in productive work per P&D driver, it improved to 97.09%. So that's a 10.171% improvement in break-even point. So just think about this, folks. That 16 minutes of improvement in productive work per P&D driver had a tremendous impact on profitability. It dropped that variable cost as a percent of revenue down 2.33%, and it improved our break-even point 10.71%. That's why you have to understand this calculation of break-even point, because it is a leverage principle. As I said, for every 1% increase in variable cost, your break-even point is going to change 3 to 7%. So it depends on your company. So it goes back to what I've been saying: small changes produce large changes in either the up or down direction. And I think this is an illustration of how true that really is, and how important it is to really manage from the operation side, that P&D operation, on a day-to-day basis, because we do have a lot of control over that P&D operation day to day. So that's it, folks. So that small change of 16 minutes of productive work per trip per driver had a tremendous impact on the profitability of the company. Did it. Variable cost as a percent of revenue, that's the key number, because it drives your contribution margin percent, which drives your break-even point and profitability of your company. A little long this time, I'm sorry. I apologize. I didn't want to break it up, but thank you for listening. And until next time, the best to you and yours. I wish you all the best. See ya.